Good evening, folks. Well, I tell you, it's way different than yesterday. We had a big, strong cold front, which I imagine most of it's hit you guys by now, and we went from low 70s to 39 degrees with a wind, 27-degree wind chill. I don't know, for all y'all that are kind of getting in on this late, not counting family. It started out just being family, and now it's kind of turned into something else because I shared it on a Facebook and people are liking it. And I think a lot of it's got to do with the fact that we're all just hunkered in and we're all about reminiscing and influencing people that's influenced your lives. And so for those of y'all that are just kind of getting in on this, I promised my family I would text something or put something out there every day about my brother Roger passing, and most of y'all knew him. And if he knew you, be honest with you, if you knew my brother, your family. Matter of fact, our motto at the Kirk House, if any of you guys used to know, I remember Brian Powell, that was his mom and dad. Called my mom and dad. And you guys in DCAB know who Brian Powell is. Anyway, when you were at the Kirk House, R.B. Kirk and Barbara Kirk House, their motto was, and they would tell you when you got there, that if you've been here more than 5 minutes, you're no longer company. You're on your own. So, and they meant it, and they meant it in a good way. And that was not what they weren't going to wait on you, because they would serve you hand and foot. The whole time you're there. But if you needed to get up and go get something yourself, you just go get up. Go get in the kitchen, grab you something to eat, didn't matter. You were family. And, that's always been our motto, and that's kind of who I've kind of migrated to people like that. My best friend, Bill Bevan, his family's that way, the Bevan family. I wasn't there 5 minutes, and it's like I was family. So, and that was back in the 70s, and here we are, still best friends. And his kids call me Uncle Ward. It kind of reminds me of my mom and dad. And my dad grew up with Devo Bollinger, and we always called him Uncle Devo, but it was my cousin, my dad's cousin. So, we've all been close and just close-knit family like that on the Kirk side. I talked about yesterday, influence with my brother and big influences, and how my dad and Uncle James were Navy recruiters in Mena, Arkansas. And my dad started out in Fayetteville, then went to Arkansas, then to Mena. And then as he's getting his last tour of duty, about to finish his career, my Uncle James is coming up, his younger brother, and he kind of had a transition there where they took over. And so they were recruiters. I think the first time in this Navy history. But still, we were going on to the Bahamas, and that's what I was going to talk to you about, the influence of my brother. I was 7, and Roger was 13, and my little brother was a year. And, we all went over there to the Bahamas, and it was just a whole nother world. It was just a child, trust me, a young child or even older, like my brother's 13. It was paradise. It was an island of Eleuthera. And on the east side of it, you could say, kind of where it was at, was the Atlantic Ocean. And on the west side was the Caribbean. It's where they meet. And so the Atlantic side just crashed in and crashed out. The Caribbean side just eased in and eased out every day. It was crystal clear water. Even the Atlantic was crystal clear. It was parallel. We lived there almost 2 years. But we had no television, and I really, really think that that's been the downfall of man in this modern era, is electronics, television in particular. I think Romans 8:28 says God takes all things and works them to the good of those who love Him and do His work. I think in that sense that God can, He can do anything. He uses those things to His good. But as a distraction, a deterrent, and also to spin lies and stuff that aren't true, The television's dangerous, and so we have to be careful with it. But we had no television, and all we had was radio. And so we had to entertain ourselves big time. And, my mom had a little one. He was barely a year old. I don't even think he was a year old when we got there. And so Bobby was born in 61. I think we were there by the time we were there in 62. It was our first year there. And so barely, he was almost a year, not quite a year when we got there. But anyway, so we get there. So it's me and Roger. Here I am, 7 years old. He's 13. And we both went to private school. Well, there was a private school for teenagers, and it was like very, very expensive. And then there was seventh grade and up. So my mom homeschooled Roger, and which, in my opinion, really influenced Roger. My mother was, you talking about Roger being extremely intelligent. My mom was, I think my mom could have been a doctor. Her brother was a doctor, but that was a different era. My mom was an extremely intelligent lady, and I think that's where he got a lot of it from. I really do. Not that my dad wasn't intelligent, because he was too. He was just a hard-working son of a gun. But Roger was homeschooled by my mom. And I thought I was going to get the homeschool, but they had this little school in a little bitty town called Hatchet Bay. And the school overlooked this bay. It was just absolutely gorgeous. And the windows behind the teachers showed the deal. So I think that's where my attention deficit started right there, because she'd be trying to teach and I'm looking out the back window like, holy cow, I want to go swimming. But anyway, so that's where it was. But my schooling, not to get away, too much what this is about, which is Roger, but my schooling there was like your parents talk about, where they had one room, 12 grades, and one teacher, all in one room. So when she got there, you started in the first grade, and I was in the second at the time. So the first grade, you would have assignments the night before. You'd have to stay busy. And it was in English. It was all English too, by the way. You drove on the left-hand side of the road, not the right-hand side of the road. They had English shillings and da-da-da. It was English rule back then. So we had an English teacher named Miss Saxton, which was as mean as she could be. At least I thought she was. But they would teach us, and they'd start with the first grade, and you had to sit there and listen to it. And then she'd give them assignments. There's like 2 or 3 in each class, to be honest with you. 6th grade was 4. So there's an average of 4 or 5 in every class from 1 through 6. So, do the math. We had that many people in one room. And then she would go through them and teach one of them. And you had to sit there and listen to, even though you're doing 2nd grade work, you're listening to her teach 6th graders, which was, on me, it was tough, because I was all about imagination and daydreaming, and you couldn't have erasers either. I've come to the point that that's why America outdid England, because we were free. I mean, we were free to make mistakes, and back then, if you made a mistake, it was just horrible. I had a pencil with no eraser on it. If you made a mistake, you made a mistake, and you had to correct it later on. So that caused a lot of problems with me, but we won't go there. So anyway, that's where we were. We're in the Bahamas. We're having a blast. And my brother, 13, was just so adventurous and so imagination, just running wild. And he just came off of a childhood, which I'll get into here in a few days, with Larry Longino, where he grew up with in Arkansas. They had imaginations running crazy, and I grew up under that. So influence, again, we're talking about. And so we go to the Bahamas. We had this house that was probably no further than 200 yards from the Atlantic Ocean. And you go over this hill and you drop down, and there's this little bitty cove with almost white pink sand and big old black coral rocks, coral everywhere, and it's crashing in and out. And when the tide was out, we had our own little beach we could swim in. And Roger and I would go down there, and he'd pack these little army pack deals with olives, and I hated them, but they got sardines, and I'd eat 1 or 2, and crackers, and we'd be on these adventures, man. I mean, these imaginational adventures. like we were pirates, or we were defending the fort, which was they were coming to the island to take it over. We would do this stuff constantly every day. I mean, imagine that. I mean, the coldest it ever got was 68, and I don't ever remember it getting that cold, and then, it was tropical, and so it was an amazing time for our family, and big time influence. And my brother was 13, which is going through puberty and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going through this. Roger was. If he's going through it, you're going through it. So whether you wanted to or not. But man, our family we were just so happy, and everything was just. And I'm telling you, because we didn't have television, we had records, and my mom had vinyls, and they'd play all kinds of stuff, I mean, I don't know how many times I've heard her favorite was. Let's don't have a old folks moment here, but it was Jim Reeves, and it was just these lullaby love songs. If you ever listen to Jim Reeves, it was about. But see, my mom, went through World War II, and Korean War. Well, my dad was gone a lot. I mean, I was only a year at a time, not 6 months, 3 months, or 2 months. A year, he'd be gone. So she would be with her sisters or living and stuff like that. So Jim Reeves comes along and sings songs like, my mom and dad get to talk on the telephone like rarely. It was always letters. And so if she ever got to talk to him, I'm sure that's why she loved Jim Reeves, because Jim Reeves would be like my dad going, "Oh, I miss you so much." And I remember one of the lyrics is, "Put your sweet lips a little closer to the phone," because they missed each other so much. And so there was separation there. But that was a big deal about the strong women back then. They took it. And they went through it, and they stood by their man, which is an old country song too. Stand by your man. I mean, all that kind of stuff, and we grew up in that era, and it's an era gone by, but I'm hoping it comes back. I think times like these will bring it back to that kind of stuff. But we're there in the Bahamas, like I said, and my dad was a chief in the Navy, and the chief on a ship, he was chief's boat's mate. So he had a bunch of men under him, and he was in charge of maintenance on it. So anything goes wrong, you went to chief, and chief got it fixed and had somebody get it fixed. So he was a delegator, unbelievable delegator, and would be the captain's right-hand man. So if he needs something done, he'd go to chief boats. And so when you got on dry land, it was the same thing. It's a ship on land. And where we were at the time, it was in the 60s, where there was a Cold War going on with Russia. And actually, when we were there, it was the Russians sending submarines to Cuba and that kind of stuff. I didn't realize it at the time, but later on, looking back, I mean, we go pulling up my dad ran the base. I mean, ran it. I mean, nothing got done without him knowing about it or doing it. So we pull up, and me and Roger pull up in a Jeep with him on the Navy base, and we pull up this big fence, and the big fence is no entrance, no blah, blah, guards, and it said top secret. And my dad would go inside and come back out and go on. But I learned later on, they were laying cables all over the Atlantic Ocean to track these submarines or track any kind of a ship movement towards Cuba. And that's what that island, if you look on a map, Eleuthera, don't ask me, it starts with an E-L. World's worst speller, sorry. Anyway, so if you look it up on the map, it's in the outer islands, and so is the strategic, unbelievable place to have that. So we'd leave there, and then Dad would go take us all over the place. We had a movie house. Dad chose the movies. I mean, he got to do all that stuff. He chose the movies, and we'd watch movies at this movie theater once a week. It'd be a brand new movie coming in. I mean, I saw stuff like The Alamo with John Wayne. Every John Wayne movie ever came through. The Pike came through there. And then we would go down the docks to unload the ship for supplies. Well, we were chief's kids, man, and I mean, we were like royalty. I mean, they treated us like gold because my dad could make or break them. So we got extra stuff, and they were extra nice to us, and we got to sit up on the tarps and watch them unload stuff. And and to be a crate full of fruit, and one of the sailors would throw us a banana. Man, we're eating bananas. Not only that, they grew bananas there, but on the island, so we'd get those too. But still, we got to do all this stuff as kids, and it was just nonstop stuff like this. And then when school was out and during the summertime, we would go. My mom would just take us and drop us off. It opened like at 10 or at 11, and at the beach, the naval beach, which was where everybody went to swim. But they had a snack bar there, and they made hamburgers and all that stuff. So we'd go there and do that and make snack bar, eat the snack bar and eat the ham. I still remember the taste of those burgers. It was unbelievable. They were just nothing but mustard and ketchup and some kind of sauce on them. They were just off the grill. They were just fabulous. But the beach, when we get there, would be, most of the time, just my recollection, the tide would be in because it'd be early in the morning. So as the tide went out, went out, and then in the sand would get deeper, the water gets shallower, and you had to play in the sand. But I mean, my mom would drop us off there all day long. So, after almost 2 years, we were almost black because we wore nothing but a bathing suit. And I remember my mom telling me, I don't kind of remember it, but my mom telling me that we didn't even use masks after a while. We just dove into the ocean, the salt water, with no mask. It didn't even hurt us anymore. We got used to it. But boy, those times, man. I mean, Roger and I would take off the backyard, and that one cove was the only part you could get to the ocean. The rest of it was just high bluffs on that side of the island. And we would take these long trips. Like I said, he'd pack pretzels and all kinds of stuff in there. And then there was an old abandoned barn, and we'd play fort and play army in that. And I remember, it seemed like to me it was something that was forever. It was almost like it was 100 yards long, but there's probably no telling it wasn't that far. But we had the old can with a string in it, and we would talk. And literally, you could hear it. And it was really cool. I mean, you'd listen and you'd hear, and not every word, but you could make out sounds and words and what they were talking about. So we'd communicate through the can with a string in it and that kind of stuff. And I cherish those moments. I mean, those are just amazing, amazing times. There's a place called the Shark Hole, where there was places on the island that had a big pit on the Atlantic side, and there was big holes in the coral. This hole in the coral was huge. Of course, I was little then. I don't know how big it was, but to me, being young, it was really big, and these chicken plants that slaughtered chicken houses would come dump the remains or the guts and stuff in that hole when the tide was out. When the tide came in, it washed it all out. And I mean, we'd have on that west side of the island, east side of the island, we'd have sharks of every species you can imagine. It was amazing. And the little kids, you're looking at them, these fins are everywhere, and these guys would shark fish with a cord about as big around a half inch, or a quarter inch, whatever it is, nylon rope, and they'd put a big old giant hook on it and run it up a chicken and throw it out there with a float, and the shark would get it and take off, and man, and it was neat to watch them do all that. They bring it in, cut the head off. We got films of it. My little brother on a head after being cut off and snapping like that. He pulls his feet back, But those are times with Roger Glenn that I wouldn't trade him for the world. And being his little brother and him taking me, I was his only friend, outside of school. So that's where he and I got really, really, really close. And that's why we never really kind of separated till later on in life because of different difficulties. But that, that's neither here nor there. That's all forgiven and long before this. But it's those times. We're talking about innocence. Innocence of America, which America's lost its innocence. And I think it's coming back. I really do. America's innocence is coming back. So you need to teach your kids this stuff. Put the electronics away, even though we're communicating with electronics and like that. But put a time limit on it. No television. Be honest with you, you can communicate like this and not even do the television at all. And you'll get along a lot better. I mean, you really, really will. I mean, there was one time in our lives I sold every TV in our house. I really did. And my family freaked out. I go, no, we're done with television. And it was, I say family. We had my nephew, Dustin, staying with us. And when he was a young kid for about 5 years. And we did away with television. And it was a great time. We just got together. Because when we got back to the States, we were arguing, fussing, fighting, and that kind of thing. And my mom all got mad and set us all down. I mean, this is my mom. My mom, she never does this. Set us down as a family. Even my mom, my dad said, look, I'm going to know what the problem is. We never had television over there. And we got television here. And that's the problem. We're at each other's throats. We're grupping, we're bitching, you know. And she goes, we need to cut this crap out. So she was very smart, very intelligent. So that said, you know, that's the Bahamas deal. Some of you guys on Facebook asked me to talk, don't forget DCAB. So we moved from the Bahamas, came back and came to DeKalb for a brief moment and then came back later on. So I promised y'all I'd talk about DeKalb tomorrow, just to give you a kind of an insight on it. My mom as a little girl and a teenager and her sisters, she had four sisters, there's 5 girls in the Ward family, or 3 boys, and so there's 10 of them. And but they were about 60, 70 miles from DeKalb, and they had an interaction with DeKalb long before the family kind of migrated over there. Her brother, Harold Ward, Dr. Ward, wound up being a doctor in DeKalb, and that's the whole family migrated towards that out of Arkansas. But DeKalb's the next stop. Love doing this. Love talking about my brother Roger. Loved him to death, still do. We'll just leave you with this. Proverbs, there's a Proverbs for every day of the month. And today is Proverbs 3. Those of you who are interested, go there and read it. And it really relates to the times we're in right now. Written by Solomon. Solomon, deemed by God as the wisest man to ever live, because he was 20-something years old, became king of Israel. And the priest came to him and said, hey, you can, you know, what do you need? I'm going into the Holy of Holies to talk to God, and what do you need? And he said, ask God, Jehovah, to give me wisdom. And that, as a young man, he asked for wisdom. So by doing that, God deemed him to be the wisest man to ever live. Unbelievable writings in that. Deuteronomy, Ecclesiastes, you know, all about Solomon. He's just an amazing guy. But Proverbs, 28 over 29 of them were him. And those Proverbs, there's 31 Proverbs. There's one for every day. So if you read it, it'll help you out in life all day. A song you love to sing all the time. I don't know all the words. I'll do the best I can. Just leave you with this. It was called Mino Walking Blues. And so here we go. Woke up this morning, looked around for my shoes. You know I had them mean old walking blues. Look up this morning, looked around for my shoes. You know I had them mean old walking blues. The only way to get rid of them blues is to get up and walk them blues away. See y'all tomorrow.